What's up, everybody? It's the Cowboy JR Storm and my buddy JK Candell coming at you with the final edition of this SimWorld U Conference Preview Series. Today we're covering the Southeastern Conference. JK, how we doing, my man? SimWorld U opening night just a few nights away. Man, are you excited as I am, man? I'm freaking pumped, man. Let's go.
I'm phenomenal. I'm pumped. I'm ready to talk some SEC. A lot of polarizing teams that you and I did talk about on SimWorld yesterday, but I think we can kind of delve a little bit deeper on this episode of the J-Rock Show, so I'm excited to get into that. So let's start in Tuscaloosa. They're called a football school. I don't believe it. The Alabama Crimson Tide. DJ Child, a lot of question marks about that ankle injury. He's the key player on this team, but I'm really liking Aiden Weaver as a potential breakout. I'm really liking the Coco Bryce addition, and I really like Levin Cutler and Dewana Epps down low. I think that this team has a lot of potential, but I'm definitely a little bit lower on them compared to other people.
Right. I think Alabama easily ends up with a winning record this season. I don't think a lot of people would disagree about that, but I think their level of success and how long their season will go or how extended it will be will depend on DJ Childs and his, health situation. And yes, even outside of DJ Childs, a lot of talent on this team, but a lot of it's, youth and incoming, so it'll hinge on how they grow and develop as well. But I have to say, Alabama is definitely one of the few teams that I could picture winning the SEC realistically. Are they my pick at this point? No, but definitely wouldn't be surprised to see them winning it.
Absolutely. I think that there's just I'm not super moved by the talent outside of Childs on this roster. I like Quincy Henderson, but don't love this roster. Let's stay in that southeast area. Let's talk about a team that's very polarizing for what they did this offseason. The Arkansas Razorbacks. You bring in DJ Wagner, you bring in John Calipari. How high do those expectations become for Arkansas?
Well, expectations just went through the roof. I mean, to be quite honest, DJ Wagner obviously is going to step in and instantly be, one of the main guys on that team. But he's also been getting outplayed by Norvell Dijon-Jones. So Arkansas could honestly end up having not just one of the best backcourts in the SEC, but potentially all of SimWorld U. And a lot of people are also overlooking the fact that they're bringing in former Beyond the Arch forward Nick Bowie, who has shown at times that he can score from deep, attack the bucket, fly through the air. I mean, can do it all. People aren't even looking at Nick Bowie. And then, Javion Shepard. But the one thing that concerns me with this Arkansas team is size.
I was thinking it too.
You have Rollins Durrett Caster at 6'10", and you have three guys behind him at 6'7", but outside of that, your next tallest guy is 6'4". And when you're playing against, even an Auburn with a Honcho Hardwick, or, even a Missouri with having David Drafin and Jimmy Honecker, 6'10 and 6'11 there, I think Arkansas could very well struggle against bigger teams.
However, guard play wins games in Hoopsteria.
Very true.
So I think I love Nick Bowie. I like Dijon-Jones and DJ Wagner. I think that is in my top 5 best backcourt to SimWorld U. I think this team, they might sputter a bit in the regular season, but unlike John Calipari's tenure at Kentucky, I think this team is built for a deep run in Hoopsteria.
It definitely wouldn't surprise me. Arkansas is right up there. Arkansas, unquestionably a top 4 team in the SEC. from my perspective at this point, I don't like to, go out and say that a lot of teams, I think, could realistically win a conference championship. But the SEC, right off the rip, Alabama, Arkansas, you can pretty much factor them into the top of the SEC. But I think how the season starts out for Arkansas is going to kind of dictate how the rest of the regular season will go. I think it's very dependent on how they start right out of the gate.
I would agree with that, but let's move on to Auburn. The Auburn Tigers, Bruce Pearl, definitely one of the more intriguing coaches in the SEC, brings in a very, very fun freshman recruiting class in Barkley James, Bevins, and Patches at Honcho Hardwick. I love this guard duo of Patches and James. Patches is the defensive guy who can step up on the offensive end when needed, and Barkley James, he's finally the focal point of an offense. He can shoot it, he can score, but he really didn't get to showcase that very much with Heartland because of his brother Benari. I think even with a guy like Cassio Atkinson, Rowan Beer, this is a very, very strong Auburn team that can very well create shockwaves in the SEC and potentially even win this conference. They're my sleeper in the SEC, and I'll say it outright.
Yeah, I definitely see Auburn as a sleeper team as well. This was one of my favorite recruiting classes of the entire recruiting cycle, to be quite honest with you. Because Bruce Pearl went out and Auburn had very clear needs following the end of last season. And Bruce Pearl went out and he hit on every single one of those. Honcho Hardwick, they needed an intimidating presence, defensive down low, who can really affect the game on both ends of the floor there. You got Barkley James, like you said, a guy who's now finally going to get more of a chance to show what he can do offensively. And then you look at Bevins and Patches. He was one of the best defensive guards, and not just guards, one of the best defenders in all of SimWorld Prep this past season, who is a bigger guard at 6'5", but he can also score, like you said, too. I am very high on this Auburn team as well, but the one thing that I think might hurt them at first is they're a very young team. They have 5 freshmen and 5 sophomores. There are no juniors or seniors on this team, and that experience, I think in the beginning, that'll kind of force them to struggle a little bit, but I could very well see them working that out before, conference play or before conference tournament. But that's the one thing that concerns me with this Tiger team.
Moving on to another very inexperienced team, the Florida Gators. I'm a big Trey Willis fan. Really athletic, very good from deep, but definitely needs to take those strides as a playmaker. Him and Levi Rhodes are one of the more underrated backcourts in all of SimWorld U. But Rhodes is a bit undersized. That backcourt is a bit undersized. But I really like the addition of Tyshawn Isom for this Florida team.
Yeah, Tyshawn Isom was a guy for the Yacht Club who, got overlooked, obviously when you're playing behind guys like Bianco, 2 seasons ago, and then Josiah Cook and Darius McBride even, you could throw Tamir Johnson and Trey Willis into that conversation as well. I think Florida is now an opportunity for him to show more of what he can do, and I think Trey Willis could very well be a breakout player for the Gators this season. But I see Florida more as a middle-of-the-pack team in the SEC at most. I just think they're going to struggle this season without having really, a guaranteed go-to option, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that they're going to do damage next season when they have a lot more experience, but I think they're a year away. But I think Trey Willis is going to put people on notice this season. But going from Mike White's former school to his current school, Mike White coaching the Georgia Bulldogs. They're at the top of the rankings consistently in SimWorld U football, but SimWorld U basketball, a very different story. However, they did bring in former AT Alien star Royce Anderson. Is Royce Anderson enough to lead this team to Hoopsteria?
I don't think so. I love what Royce Anderson can do, very all-around on both ends of the floor. Darion Kingy-Cross, I'm a big fan of his game as well. Christian Fazekas, I think, could be one of the more underrated bigs in the SEC. But outside of that, I have more questions and concerns with this group than I do, high points.
Answers.
Yeah, answers. I have more questions and concerns than I do answers.
I'm definitely keeping an eye on Royce Anderson, though. I would not be shocked if he wound up averaging over 15 points per game as a freshman. It definitely reminds me a lot of when Anthony Edwards was at Georgia, where they didn't surround him with a very good roster. Still managed to put scouts on notice. But I do like Darion Kingy-Cross. 6'6", 205, true sophomore. I think him and Fazekas are both going to be very nice complementary pieces. And I like the size this team has, but not particularly there yet. I think they're going to be near or at the bottom of this conference, despite Royce Anderson's contributions.
Yeah, you definitely took the Anthony Edwards resemblance out of my mouth there or reference there on that one. I was just about to say that, the same type of situation, I think, is what I see when you talk about this Georgia Bulldog team. And now moving on to a team with a new coach, we've got the Kentucky Wildcats.
You lose Coach Cal. Talk about a way to kind of stay afloat. You got Jamison Johnson and Gloria Tate, two guys projected to be lottery picks in the upcoming SWBA draft. And Jamison Johnson, that is a man amongst boys. Good Lord.
Yeah, and Adonis Knight, was a breakout player for the Bay Area Breakers this past SimWorld Prep season. Showed what he can do, very all-around offensive player, can score in just about every way. Is an above-average defender, would like to see a little bit more improvement there out of him. And then you look at guys like Kadarius Silva, Trey Trust, and then one of the more intriguing guys on this team, who I don't think a lot of people have talked about, Victor Soto. His numbers with SimWorld Asia Pacific from the past 2 seasons, they're not going to jump out at you, but I really like the versatility that he brings to the floor. And on this Kentucky team, he is not going to have to be a top option, so I think that allows him, in certain ways, to sort of play a little bit more freely with less pressure. And I think I really like this Kentucky team, but I'm a little hesitant to put my money down on them making a deep Hoopsteria run just because they have a first-year head coach. I mean, I would say their chance to win the SEC could very well happen, but I'm hesitant because of, new coach, new system, and we haven't seen how they'll adapt yet.
I agree with that. I like Johnson. I like Tate. They have some good guards, but they're not super deep at the position. Like I say, guard play wins games in Hoopsteria in March. So I like Kentucky. I don't love them. I don't think they're the best team in this conference. We'll get to who I think is later. But let's move on to a team that I have very low expectations for, and that's the LSU Tigers. Outside of Akeem Young, and this team has some experience, but I think this is a very largely unimpressive roster.
Yeah, I mean, really, outside of Akeem Young and Patricio Ramirez, there's not a lot I'm excited about with this LSU team.
And their guards are so undersized. They're 6 foot and 6'2". You don't got a guy like J.C. Graham who's got great size for the guard position, or even a guy like Bevins and Patches. Their guards are going to struggle with those bigger guards. And outside of Ramirez and Akeem Young, there's not very much I'm excited about with this team. I think they're, with Georgia, going to be at the bottom of this conference. It's like the anti-SimWorld football.
Yeah, without question. I think LSU is very much a team that I think they're more of a next year team or, a next 2-year team. They are sources do say that they are going heavy out on the recruiting, very heavy out on the recruiting trail, and they're connected to a lot of high-profile SimWorld prep guys. So I think the horizon is definitely in sight for them, but not this season.
Yeah. Talking about another team where the expectations are not very high, the Mississippi State, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. You got Terrell Pearson, and you got Josiah Townley. Nobody else I'm a fan of.
Nope. I see Mississippi State as being at the bottom, if not the very bottom team in the SEC. Yes, they do have some senior leadership on this team, but just not a lot that excites me. Not a lot that excites me about this roster.
Yeah, I'll agree with you right there. Outside of Terrell Pearson, I think this team is one of the worst among the power conferences. I think that they'd be lucky to win 10 games.
Yeah, I think that is a safe bet to say. And moving on now to one of the more interesting storylines of the SimWorld U recruiting cycle, we've got the Missouri Tigers. They bring in
Japhett Towns, baby.
They bring in Japhett Towns, who was the number one player in all of SimWorld Prep last season, but then struck out for the most part on the rest of the recruiting trail. They do bring in Tristan Harrison and Jamari Holyfield. I'm a big fan of Jamari Holyfield and what he can do in every aspect of the court. Missouri, they will have David Drafin at 6'11", and Jimmy Honecker, like I mentioned earlier, at 6'10", a junior and a senior combo down low in the paint. Their front court, I think, could honestly be one of the bigger surprises positively in SimWorld U. I think that's my hot take for this episode, is that Missouri could end up with one of the best front courts in the SEC, if not in SimWorld U. And then, obviously, Japhett Towns, Dylan Bannon, but outside of that, I mean,
yeah,
definitely still have some questions with this team. But JK, what do you see about this Missouri team?
I like that they are starting four upperclassmen in the starting lineup with Japhett Towns. I think that is one of the more encouraging signs about this Missouri team that has been so polarizing all offseason. Dylan Bannon, I think he's going to be their breakout candidate. I really like David Drafin. I like Keyshawn Burkhalter. I really like this team because there's a lot of experience around Japhett Towns, and I think he's going to learn a lot. He's not going to have to put up 28 points a game like he will be for the reigning trades if they want to win games. I think Japhett Towns will average 20 points a game as a freshman, but I think he's going to have a lot more help, and I think that this team could surprise people, but I'm not going to hype them up too much, Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Missouri as a potential sleeper team. I'll put them up there with Auburn as my top two sleeper teams, in the SEC. And now moving on to the Ole Miss Rebels. They're
very little to be excited about.
They do bring in Mason Green and Zahid Pearsons, who I think could develop into some very nice players, but JK just...
They also bring in Kamari Ward.
Kamari Ward as well, former Originators guard, who, definitely wasn't the number one guy and got overlooked by, overshadowed by DJ Wagner, Cooper Flagg, Elgauskas, all those guys, the defending SimWorld Prep champs. But I see Ole Miss struggling this season. I think...
Me too. I like Mason Green, though. 7 foot. 220, true freshman. I like Buggy Fruge. I like Zahid Pearsons. I like Kamari Ward. I think they'll all thrive in bigger roles. And I like that this team is mostly upperclassmen or guys with some level of SimWorld U experience. But I do think that they're a year away before they can even think about making noise in this conference.
Yeah, I think they're a lot of their roster is more development type players at this point that I think might be long term, guys and not two and done, in SimWorld U with the 2-year rule. But definitely a team to keep your eye on over the next couple of seasons, but I'm not very high on them for this season. But moving on, staying down there in the Southeast, we've got South Carolina. A lot of people are high on this team, JK, but I'm not one of them.
Me either. I like Keandre Baldridge. I like Isaiah James. I just think he needs to grow more of an offensive bag if he wants to be a legitimate SWBA first-round pick. I love what he can do on the defensive end. I think he needs to kind of refine his game a lot more on the offensive end. And this is saying someone who knows Isaiah well. He's a great kid. I think his game does need more work.
Yeah, without question. I very well believe he could honestly be one of the better defenders in the SEC, if not in all of SimWorld U. And I was very surprised to see Coach Lamont Parrish go public and say that Keandre Baldridge is going to be the main focal point of the offense. He definitely was not that for Southeast Select. I think he could very well, thrive in that role. But I just think...
I like South Carolina. I like McChesney and Baldridge, but their guard play is not really that encouraging to me.
Yeah, they definitely don't have a lot of depth at the guard spot. I think another team, who we're looking at maybe a year or two out from being truly, truly competitive, but no knock on them, but I just see South Carolina struggling this year.
Let's move on to my favorite team in the SEC, the Tennessee Volunteers.
Down on Rocky Top! Sorry.
You got Trey Turner. You got Henrik Vekic. You have a team that's super deep. You have Malik Riles. You have Tyree Doak. You have Ghassan Al-Azmi, a guy who I think is very underrated. I think Trey Turner should have been on that first team All-American. I love what he can do as a shooter. They don't have great ball handling, but they have lights out shooting, and I'm really high on Henrik Vekic. That's that sophomore duo. I think this team can win it all this year.
This is my pick to win the SEC right here. Tennessee is my pick to win the SEC. They only bring in 2 freshmen in Ghassan Al-Azmi and Mickey Hartman. At first, I was kind of unsure about Tennessee and how I felt about them for this upcoming season. But I think Mickey Hartman is the perfect kind of complementary backcourt piece to put alongside Trey Turner and Henrik Vekic. I think
this team is mostly experienced too.
Yeah, they have a lot of experience. Turner and Vekic are quite arguably one of the better, if not the best duo in all of SimWorld U. So I think Tennessee definitely has a Hoops Area championship ceiling, realistically, this upcoming season.
I think they will win it all. That's my hot take for the season. I think they're not only the best team in the SEC. I think they're going to get some sort of revenge on Miami this season. I think they're going to go all the way to cutting down those nets in the quad.
I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see that. And now, to wrap up the show today, we've got the Texas A&M Aggies. They bring in only...
Gig 'em. Oh, that just made my skin crawl as a Texas fan.
Definitely. And, they only bring in 2 freshmen in Keith and Carter and Ronnie Shanahan. 2 players who I think could develop into very quality, SimWorld U players. But Texas A&M, another team who I see at most being middle of the pack this upcoming season.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I was thinking the same. I like Shanahan. I like Keith and Carter. But I really like Marshawn Henderson. I think Ronnie Shanahan can learn a lot from him. But these guards, Tyrell Marge and Michael Pitt, decent, but not going to be able to contend with the DJ Wagners or the Royce Andersons of the SEC.
Yeah, I don't think I will I will definitely not argue with you on that one, JK, but that's going to do it for our show today here on the J-Rock Show, the last edition of the J-Rock Show before SimWorld U opening night, Tuesday, October 1st. Y'all better be tuned in. I know we on the J-Rock Show definitely will be. JK, heck of an episode today, my brother. I am so ready for the start of the SimWorld U season, man.
Get ready. I got some hot takes for y'all once the season starts. So just stay tuned for those.
Yeah, definitely. You'll have to tune in to the J-Rock Show to hear those hot takes. This has been JK Candell and the Cowboy JR Storm here on the J-Rock Show. Get ready for SimWorld U opening night this coming Tuesday. And remember, SimWorld is the only place where you can see the game, be the game.